What we call wealth is not born in the market or the ledger. It germinates in the secret folds of the mind. You believe you are pursuing security, freedom, abundance. Yet what if I told you the force that drives you toward wealth is the same force that sabotages it? You think you are rational in your desire for success, but desire is rarely rational. Beneath your ambition there is a current, silent and relentless, shaped by memories you do not recall, by conflicts you did not resolve, by wounds you learned to seal with silence. Have you ever wondered why some people, despite effort, sabotage their own success? Why money slips through their fingers as if wealth itself refuses to stay? Or why others accumulate endlessly, yet never feel rich, only restless? It is not about numbers. It is about the inner economy of the psyche. Wealth, like love, is filtered through your unconscious beliefs about what you deserve, what you fear, and what you are willing to suffer for. The first truth is this: the mind resists what it thinks it cannot survive. To the conscious self, wealth appears as a goal, but to the unconscious, it may appear as a threat. Why? Because wealth changes the terms of your existence. It strips away excuses, forces you to confront who you are without struggle. And for many, struggle is not just familiar, it is home. The second truth: your relationship with wealth is a reenactment of your earliest bonds. As a child, you absorbed lessons about abundance and lack, about safety and danger, long before you understood money. If love felt scarce, you may unconsciously treat wealth as scarce. If love came with conditions, you may believe wealth too requires constant sacrifice. Even now as an adult, your financial life may be nothing more than a stage upon which these infantile dramas replay themselves. Third, repression is expensive. The psyche spends immense energy keeping unacceptable truths out of awareness. Guilt, anger, shame, all repressed, all costly. This psychic expenditure leaves less vitality for creation, for focus, for the audacity to receive. Many who remain stuck financially are not lazy or unskilled. They are exhausted from the inner war they cannot name. Fourth, wealth amplifies the conflicts you refuse to resolve. The poor man imagines riches will cure his pain, but money only removes the distractions of survival, leaving him face to face with the questions he spent a lifetime avoiding. Who am I? What if I do not deserve this? What will I do if they envy me, despise me, leave me? To the unconscious, poverty may feel safer than success because it preserves the old defenses. Fifth, we cling to familiar suffering more tightly than unfamiliar freedom. Freud called this the compulsion to repeat. The unconscious seeks to recreate known patterns, even painful ones, because they are predictable. You may call this bad luck, but luck is often the mask of your unresolved past. Sixth, fantasy protects you from action. We dream of abundance precisely to avoid pursuing it. As long as wealth is a fantasy, we are safe from failure, safe from envy, safe from the terror of actually living. To renounce the fantasy and step into reality requires mourning the death of the self that survived through wishing. And seventh, to change your financial reality, you must change what you can tolerate feeling. Not what you think, not what you say, but what you can feel. Can you bear the anxiety of receiving, the guilt of surpassing those you love, the grief of outgrowing the self who believed life was always meant to be a struggle? Wealth is not created by affirmations. It is created by confronting the unconscious barriers you have erected against it. To look inward is to see the machinery of repression, resistance, fear. It is not easy. The ego will defend itself. It will insist, "This is nonsense. I want success." But the unconscious is older, deeper, more cunning. Until you turn toward it, your wealth will reflect not your conscious will, but your hidden wounds. This is not a call to dream bigger. It is a call to see clearer, to walk into the labyrinth of your own mind, to see how you have both longed for and refused abundance, to recognize how wealth is never about money alone. It is about power, love, guilt, survival. To possess it fully, you must first survive the truth of yourself. The unconscious does not speak in words. It speaks in symptoms, in slips, in strange detours of behavior, in the quiet sabotage of your own aspirations. You say you want wealth, yet some part of you flinches at the thought of holding it. This flinch is subtle, imperceptible, but it is decisive. It is the hand that closes just as you are about to receive. It is the delay, the procrastination, the bad timing that feels like fate. And still you tell yourself you are trying. But trying is not the same as allowing. Trying is often the clever disguise of resistance, a way of staying safe within the familiar patterns of lack. You do not yet know how much you fear freedom. Freedom from debt, freedom from worry, freedom from survival. It sounds absurd. Why would anyone fear such a thing? Yet freedom exposes you. It deprives you of excuses, of familiar pain, of the self who was defined by striving. Who are you if there is no struggle? What fills the silence when hunger is gone? The mind, unprepared, panics at the prospect of this emptiness. It would rather return to the suffering it understands than step into a spaciousness that feels like death. This is why so many find ways to lose what they gain. An inheritance squandered, a business abandoned, a windfall devoured by chaos. Consciously, they mourn. Unconsciously, they are relieved. The burden of having was too much to bear. To have is to risk losing. To have is to risk envy, judgment, separation, the unconscious bargains. Better to forego abundance entirely than endure the pain of its fragility. And yet you continue to seek, not knowing you are caught in this double bind. Your ego says, "I want more," but your deeper self whispers, "More is dangerous." This inner conflict does not resolve itself through willpower or discipline. It resolves only through recognition, through a slow and often painful encounter with the parts of you that have been exiled from awareness. Those parts carry stories you do not wish to remember, stories of rejection, of humiliation, of longing denied. They are alive in you still, shaping every decision, every hesitation, every fantasy. Fantasy, too, is a fortress. You sit and imagine the life you would have if only you were rich. But as long as you are imagining, you are not acting. As long as you are dreaming, you are protected from the anxiety of reality. To move from fantasy into embodiment is to grieve the self who survived on illusions. It is to step into the unknown, where failure is possible and success even more terrifying. For success demands you outgrow the old loyalties, the old identities, and somewhere within, you may believe it is betrayal to have more than those who loved you in their lack. The child you once were still lives in you. That child learned rules about love and worth that were never spoken aloud but carved into your nervous system. Perhaps they learned that to be too visible was dangerous. Perhaps they learned that asking for too much brought punishment or withdrawal. And so now, as an adult, you find yourself conflicted, longing for abundance, yet unconsciously limiting how much you allow. Every time you exceed the threshold of what feels familiar, a wave of guilt or fear pulls you back. This threshold is not rational. It is emotional, inherited from the earliest moments when you discovered what it cost to depend on others. Repression ensures these early lessons remain hidden. It ensures the conscious mind remains convinced, I just need to work harder. I just need better strategies. But repression is not free. It demands constant vigilance. It consumes energy, creativity, joy. It leaves you too depleted to take the very steps that would move you forward. And so you cycle between bursts of effort and periods of collapse, never asking why you are so tired. To ask would be dangerous, for the answer is not flattering. The answer is this: you are tired because you are divided against yourself. One part of you longs to expand. Another is sworn to protect the old order, the safety of staying small. This inner war will not end until you turn inward, not to conquer the resisting part, but to listen to it. What is it protecting? What catastrophe does it imagine wealth will unleash? Often these fears are irrational but powerful. The fear of being alone, the fear of being resented, the fear of becoming greedy or corrupt. You have inherited cultural and familial stories about wealth, and even if you consciously reject them, they operate in the background, unseen. To become aware of these stories is to take the first step toward freedom. But awareness is not comfortable. It demands you see the contradictions within you, the places where you have been both victim and jailer. And so we return to the question, can you tolerate what wealth would ask of you? Not the practical responsibilities, but the emotional ones. Can you tolerate the guilt of succeeding where others have failed? Can you tolerate the anxiety of no longer hiding in struggle? Can you tolerate the mourning of the self who believed that suffering was noble, that scarcity was safe? If you cannot, you will sabotage unconsciously. You will create emergencies that consume your gains. You will attract partners, colleagues, and situations that drain you. You will convince yourself you are unlucky, or that the world is unfair, and perhaps it is. But the more pressing question is this: what in you has been loyal to the unfairness? What in you has needed it to survive? There is no affirmation strong enough to override the unconscious. The unconscious does not yield to slogans. It yields only to recognition, to the quiet, difficult work of bringing what was hidden into the light. Freud understood this. He knew the mind resists its own truth, clinging to illusions because they feel safer than reality. But he also knew this: illusions exact a price. To maintain them is to live in a cage, even if you call it freedom. Wealth begins as an inner event. It begins when you no longer need to prove your worth through deprivation, when you no longer soothe yourself with fantasies of rescue, when you no longer fear being fully alive, fully seen, fully responsible for the life you create. This is not easy. It requires the courage to feel what you have spent a lifetime avoiding. But there is no other way. The psyche will not allow you to hold in your hands what you cannot hold in your heart. You say you want wealth, but do you want the self that comes with it? The self that no longer needs to apologize, to explain, to diminish their light, to comfort others. Until you can answer yes, your desire will remain divided, and your reality will reflect this division. To heal is not to erase the past, but to see how it lives in you still, and to decide finally that you are ready to live beyond it. The question is not whether you deserve wealth. The question is whether you are willing to become the person for whom wealth is no longer a threat. And this becoming is not a matter of ambition. It is a matter of truth. The deeper you go, the more you will see that wealth is never about numbers, never about coins or contracts or currencies that can be counted and stored. It is about a psychic structure, an economy of energy and desire and fear. The mind spends what it does not have, borrows from the future to avoid the past, and calls this living. But under every financial pattern is a psychological pattern, and under every psychological pattern is a truth too raw for the ego to admit. You have been told that money follows action, that success is a matter of discipline. But discipline cannot undo what the unconscious forbids. You can force yourself to work, to strive, to accumulate. But if a part of you believes that wealth will cost you love, or belonging, or safety, you will find a way to lose it. You will spend it recklessly, delay decisions, entangle yourself in crises, and still you will say, "I don't understand. I did everything right." But the unconscious is older than your plans. It does not care for your strategies. It cares only for its own logic. Better to suffer as I have suffered than to risk becoming someone new. This is the first betrayal the mind enacts, to keep you small for the sake of a dead past. It is not because you are weak. It is because the child within you once learned that expansion led to pain. To speak too loudly invited punishment. To take too much provoked withdrawal. To shine too brightly made you a target, and so now you hesitate. You tell yourself you are being prudent, cautious, realistic. But what you call realism is often fear in disguise. The second betrayal is harder to see. It is the betrayal of longing itself. You want wealth, but you also resent that you want it. You tell yourself you should be above such desires, that money is corrupting, that to want more is to be greedy, and yet, in secret, you hunger for it. This contradiction poisons your efforts. Every move forward is laced with self-reproach. Every success carries the taste of guilt, and guilt is heavier than gold. So the psyche splits. One part striving, one part sabotaging. You live in tension, unable to surrender to lack, unable to embrace abundance. This inner conflict bleeds into your reality. You attract partners, opportunities, circumstances that mirror the war within. You say, "Why does this keep happening to me?" But somewhere in you already knows. You have made an unconscious contract with suffering. There is a certain comfort in lack. It simplifies life. It gives you enemies to blame, struggles to define you, excuses to postpone the harder questions. Who am I without my pain? What would I do if I could no longer hide in survival? To the unconscious, wealth is not liberation. It is exposure. It forces you to stand without the scaffolding of complaint, to take full responsibility for the shape of your life. Many are not ready for this. They prefer the fantasy of abundance to its reality. But fantasies are fragile. You can sense this when you dream of sudden wealth, a lottery win, an inheritance, a miracle deal, and feel a subtle dread beneath the euphoria. What if I cannot handle it? What if they turn against me? What if I become someone I hate? These are not idle fears. They are the voice of the unconscious reminding you that to have is to risk. To have is to open yourself to envy, to loss, to change. And the unconscious hates change. It is conservative in the deepest sense, clinging to what is known even if it hurts. This is why people repeat the same financial mistakes year after year, generation after generation. Freud called this the compulsion to repeat, the tendency to recreate early trauma in an attempt to master it. But mastery rarely comes. The pattern repeats because it feels safer to relive the familiar wound than to face the terror of something new. To break this cycle, you must first see it. Not superficially, but with an unflinching eye. You must ask, what am I protecting myself from by staying small? What catastrophe does my unconscious believe will come if I succeed? These questions are dangerous because they reveal that poverty is not always imposed from without. Often, it is maintained from within, not by choice but by a loyalty to old pain. Perhaps you fear outgrowing your family, leaving behind those who taught you that life was struggle. Perhaps you fear the loneliness of no longer being one of them, of standing apart in abundance. Perhaps you fear the rage of others, their judgment, their rejection. These fears are primal. They were formed when you were too young to think, when survival meant attachment at any cost. Now, as an adult, you tell yourself you are free. But freedom is not granted by age. It is granted by the work of bringing the unconscious into consciousness. Until then, you are not truly free. You are compelled to repeat, compelled to sabotage, compelled to prove and disprove your worth in an endless loop. This work is not glamorous. It will not be celebrated. It requires sitting in silence with what you have avoided, feeling the shame, the grief, the terror that wealth would evoke. It requires mourning the self who learned to survive on crumbs, the self who made virtue out of scarcity. And it requires forgiving yourself for the ways you have betrayed your own longing. For there is a part of you that has betrayed yourself. It is not your fault. You learned early on to trade authenticity for safety, but now that trade has become a prison. To step out of it is to risk everything you once thought necessary for survival. And yet, there is no other way. Wealth is not a reward for goodness, nor a punishment for sin. It is an amplification of who you are. If you are conflicted, it will amplify conflict. If you are at peace, it will amplify peace. This is why some acquire riches and descend into misery, while others remain calm with nothing. Money does not create reality. It reveals it. The question, then, is not how to make more money. The question is how to become the person for whom wealth is no longer an unconscious threat. This is not about positive thinking. It is about psychic integration. It is about making peace between the parts of you that want to expand and the parts of you that are terrified to do so. This peace cannot be forced. It must be earned through recognition, through a slow dismantling of the defenses you built to protect yourself from old wounds. As long as those defenses remain, wealth will feel dangerous, and you will find ways to avoid it. So you must descend into the underworld of your own psyche, into the caverns where guilt and fear and desire twist together. You must confront the phantoms that tell you, if you have more, you will lose love. If you succeed, you will be punished. If you grow, you will be alone. These phantoms are not real, but they have ruled your life as if they were. To see them is to weaken them. To see them is to reclaim your freedom. And yet even now, as you hear these words, some part of you resists. Some part wants to look away, to return to the familiar narrative of effort and failure. This resistance is not a flaw. It is a signal. It means you are approaching the threshold where real change begins, the place where the ego loses its illusions and the unconscious loses its power to sabotage. This is the place where wealth is no longer a dream or a terror, but a possibility. But to reach it, you must risk knowing yourself. The work deepens as you descend. It is not a straight path. It is a labyrinth of contradictions, of voices that speak over one another in the darkness. One whispers, "You deserve more." Another hisses, "To want more is shameful." One urges you forward into expansion. Another pulls you back, terrified of what abundance might reveal. And in this inner cacophony, you wonder why progress feels so fragile, why every step forward seems to awaken an invisible hand to drag you back. This is the nature of resistance. It is not loud. It is subtle, cunning. It lives in the hesitation before you act, in the fatigue that descends when opportunity arrives, in the endless deferral of decisions that could change your life. You call it bad timing, bad luck, or even self-sabotage. But it is none of these. It is the unconscious doing what it was designed to do, protecting you from what it perceives as danger. And to the unconscious, wealth is not freedom. It is danger cloaked in gold. Ask yourself why. Why does part of you recoil from the very thing you say you want? Perhaps it is because wealth threatens the balance you struck long ago, the delicate equilibrium between longing and safety. As a child, you learned how much desire you could show without punishment. You learned what was allowed and what was forbidden, not in words but in glances, in tones of voice, in the presence or withdrawal of those you depended on. And those lessons hardened into beliefs. I must not outshine them. I must not take too much. I must not be more than they could handle. These are not thoughts you consciously recall. They live in the body, in the nervous system, in the instinct to shrink when opportunity knocks. This is why new wealth feels heavy, as if the air itself thickens around you. It is the old fear stirring, if I rise, I will lose them. If I grow, I will be alone. And so you find ways to preserve the old order. You overspend, you undercharge, you invest in projects destined to fail. You dismiss ideas before they are born. Each act of sabotage is a silent vow. I will not break the rules I learned in childhood. I will not threaten the bond, even if it means betraying myself. There is no cruelty in this. The unconscious does not wish to harm you. It wishes only to keep you safe. But its map of safety is outdated, drawn in a world that no longer exists. What once protected you now imprisons you. The cage is invisible because you built it yourself. And so you live with this inner fracture. You imagine that more money will solve it, but money cannot mend a divided psyche. It only magnifies what is already there. Those who feel unworthy will find ways to prove it. Those who fear rejection will attract it. Those who distrust abundance will ensure it leaks away. To change your external wealth, you must confront the internal poverty that has been disguised as virtue. Poverty has its seductions. It can feel noble, even pure. It gives you the moral high ground in a world obsessed with acquisition. It binds you to a community of others who struggle. It allows you to avoid the envy of those who might despise your success. But beneath these comforts lies a question you must dare to ask. Have I clung to lack because it feels safer than being seen? To be seen is to risk exposure. To be seen is to risk attack. And if you have ever been punished for shining, some part of you may have sworn an oath. I will never make myself that vulnerable again. This oath was born of necessity. But now, it is the very thing that holds you back. Wealth is visibility. It draws attention, admiration, and resentment alike. It demands that you tolerate being looked at, being judged, being envied. For some, this is intolerable. They will unconsciously refuse the spotlight, sabotaging their ascent to avoid the imagined hostility of others. They will call this humility, but often it is fear wearing a mask. To untangle this fear, you must be willing to feel what the ego has worked so hard to suppress, the grief of outgrowing old identities, the loneliness of surpassing those who raised you, the guilt of stepping into a life your ancestors could not have imagined. These are not easy emotions. They are the emotions wealth evokes when it ceases to be a dream and becomes a reality. This is why so few are truly ready for abundance. It is not a question of strategy or skill. It is a question of capacity. Can you hold the discomfort that comes with expansion? Can you bear the envy of others without shrinking? Can you feel the guilt of having more and still allow yourself to keep it. Most cannot, not because they are weak, but because they have not yet seen how deeply they are entangled in the past. They have not yet recognized that the same forces that once protected them now prevent them from receiving. And so they repeat the cycle, mistaking the bars of their own cage for the limits of reality. But you are here now, listening. Some part of you suspects that the cage is not real. Some part of you is ready to see, and seeing is the beginning of freedom. Do not rush to tear down the bars. Do not rush to fill the void with affirmations and strategies. Sit first with the truth. You have been divided. You have wanted and not wanted. You have reached and withdrawn. You have longed for wealth and feared what it would demand of you. This is not failure. This is humanity. To integrate these opposites is not easy. It requires time, patience, and above all, the courage to feel. For the psyche does not change through willpower alone. It changes when the unconscious becomes conscious, when what was split off is welcomed back into the whole. And when this happens, wealth ceases to be a struggle. It ceases to be a fantasy. It becomes a reflection of an inner state, a state in which you no longer need to apologize for existing, for taking up space, for receiving fully. This is not about greed. It is about wholeness. The question is not, do you deserve wealth? That question is irrelevant. The question is, can you tolerate the life that wealth would open to you? And if you cannot yet, can you love the part of you that still clings to safety, even as you gently teach it a new way to live? The work is not to force abundance, but to make yourself ready to hold it, to expand your capacity for joy, for grief, for visibility, for responsibility. This is the quiet revolution of the psyche. No fireworks, no applause, only a subtle shift in the foundation of who you believe yourself to be. When the shift comes, wealth is no longer something you chase. It flows to you, because you are no longer pushing it away. And then for the first time, you will know what it means to be rich, not in money alone, but in the freedom to exist without apology, to create without fear, to receive without guilt. This is the wealth your unconscious has always longed for, even as it feared it. But to arrive there, you must descend first. You must go into the darkness, into the silence, into the memories you swore never to revisit. You must meet the self you became to survive. Only then can you become the self who is ready to live. There is no shortcut. There is only this descent. And the question is not whether you will make it. The question is whether you are willing to see what waits for you at the bottom. And as you stand there, at the furthest edge of yourself, you begin to see why it has always been this way, why every attempt to rise was met with collapse, why every glimpse of abundance carried a shadow of guilt. It was not bad luck. It was not sabotage. It was the unconscious keeping you loyal to a past you never questioned. All your life, you have built defenses against pain. You thought those defenses made you strong. But now you see, they were walls that kept everything out, not only fear but joy too, not only grief but love, not only danger but the very abundance you claim to seek. This is the paradox. The ego fights for survival, yet in doing so, it kills the life it was meant to protect. And now the question comes, quiet but insistent. Are you willing to let those defenses fall? This is not a question of strategy. It is not about affirmations, not about rituals, not about forcing yourself into action. It is a question of surrender. Are you willing to surrender the self who clung to suffering because it felt safer than the unknown? To say yes is terrifying. It means losing the familiar identity, the struggler, the survivor, the one who never has enough. That self has been your companion for so long it feels like you. To let it go is to step naked into a space where no story shields you, where no excuse can protect you, where you must stand as you are and claim what you once believed forbidden. This is why so few ever arrive here. The price of freedom is the death of the old self. But if you stay here, if you do not flinch, something begins to shift. Slowly, quietly, almost imperceptibly, the fear loosens its grip, the guilt softens, the inner voices grow still. And in that stillness, you realize wealth was never about gold or power or escape. It was about the capacity to exist without apology, to receive without resistance, to live without being bound by the ghosts of your past. You do not need to chase abundance. You need only to stop running from yourself. For when the unconscious is no longer at war with your longing, what you seek will flow to you, not as a reward, not as a miracle, but as a natural expression of who you have become. And then there is nothing left to fear. No hidden cost, no silent contract, no self left behind in the darkness. There is only you whole, awake, and finally free to take what was waiting for you all along. This is not the end. This is where your real life begins.